Today we're going to take a look at a full statistical breakdown of all of the Tier 1 games that happened in 2024 in Valorant. This is going to be a two-parter, so in today's video we're going to take a look at 5 of the 9 maps that were played this season. We're going to take a look at the first 5 alphabetically, and then tomorrow we'll do the other 4, and as well as the overall pick rates and overall win rates for all of the agents. So let's just dive in, shall we? Let's start here with Abyss. Now, of course, when it comes to Abyss, there isn't a large sample size here. There was only 44 comps played, which means 22 games of Abyss overall across all 4 regions. So there isn't as much, obviously, to go into here. But for now, I thought you might be somewhat interested in some of the numbers. You can see what we've got here is a team comp across the top just here. It's pick rate and it's non-mirror win rate. I have to explain this every time, but non-mirror win rate just means when, for instance, that comp played against a comp that was not that comp. It was not a mirror matchup where all the agents were the same for both sides. So that's what non-mirror means. That's what NM will mean in all of this. So you can see here the most popular comp. This is the comp that DRX played and was pretty good overall and was the most picked comp. Then below that was the comp that Team Heretics played, and basically this was just basically whatever teams played, because below that you got the Lev comp. So if a certain team played this map, you know, a fairly significant amount, then their comp was probably going to be on here like these 3 teams are. Here are the Abyss archetypes. So you got a pie chart here with the general pick rates, and here at the bottom explaining what each color is. So this 50%, most of the meta was what I've called Ascent-esque, right, where we're playing KO, we're playing Omen, we're playing Sova, you know, we're playing Jet, that kind of stuff. Those kind of comps were the majority of the meta. Then you got double duelist here in red. You got double controller comps making up kind of the second main portion of the meta. Then some no sentinel comps were in here as well, like EDG, for instance, were playing a no sentinel comp. And then if someone was going crazy, I put them in this little other section as well. Okay, and now on to the agents on Abyss, and to get on this list here for Abyss, you had to have at least 5 non-mirror games. Now, that's a very small number, and for the other maps, don't worry, we're going to increase that quite a bit. But obviously, with Abyss, such a small sample size, I thought I'd just want to show you kind of the agents that, you know, we're at least seeing some play. So interesting things to note here. I mean, first off, looking at the pick rates here, you can see Cypher, Jet, you know, up there, Omen up there, Sova up there as well. So those 4 agents did make up a majority, you know, of the kind of meta. But Astra also saw, you know, quite a bit of play, as did KO. In terms of win rates and what was interesting, I think probably the most interesting is both Cypher and Killjoy, neither of them have above 50%, which is quite rare, and perhaps does suggest that those kind of no sentinel comps like EDG were playing in the grand final, you know, maybe that is the direction people should be going in more. Maybe you don't need either a Cypher or Killjoy on Abyss to find success. Okay, so that was just a quick look at Abyss, and we didn't really have, you know, a big sample size there. But now let's move on to Ascent, where we do have 280 comps, so 140 games of Ascent that we're taking a look at here. And to no one's surprise, you all know what the most played comp was. It was the meta comp on Ascent. Perhaps a bigger surprise was how often that comp won. Because when I've done this in the past, and I have done this for the past 2 years, the meta comp on Ascent, you know, has stayed the same. The pick rate is roughly the same as it was in the previous years, you know, hovering between 50 and 60% most of the time. But the win rates were always around 50%, whereas this year it's 65. So I don't know precisely why, but this comp just seems to pick on other comps this year, especially the Cypher comp, because you can see that the next comp is just the same comp with the Cypher instead, but you can see its win rate is kind of in the bin. So there was a lot of this kind of meta Killjoy comp just beating the Cypher comp. And then at the bottom, I put this on for the Sentinel fans down here. This is the Deadlock comp, which actually did win 4 out of its 7 games. No thanks to Sentinels, and I don't think that this is a very good comp that will survive the test of time, but it did end up with a positive win rate. In terms of the archetypes on Ascent, obviously it was mostly dominated by the meta. The really only other clear archetype was the Viper comps, which really fell off in the second half of the season, but were pretty prominent actually in the first half of the season. Now, in terms of the win rates for the maps that were in for the entire season, we've upped the non-mirror games to get on the sheet from 5 to 20 games. But on Ascent, of course, because the meta is so kind of solidified, there was actually only 7 agents that got on here. So you can see here we've got, you know, Cypher versus Killjoy. Killjoy definitely winning over Cypher on Ascent for this season, which again is strange because last year it was about 50-50. But this year very much in Killjoy's favor overall. Jet, obviously, super high pick rate. KO, super high pick rate. Interestingly, Jet didn't have a positive win rate, but KO very much did anytime someone went away from KO. Isn't really too much to say about Ascent other than it's completely dull. But now let's come to a map which does have something to talk about, and that is Bind, because here on Bind you see that the pick rate numbers for the top comps are much more reasonable and in like a good spot overall. You'll recognize this middle comp here as the 100 Thieves comp that they had a lot of success with early on, and it did kind of fall off. 58 is still a good number for its non-mirror win rate, but it was way up there in the 70s and 80s at one point. But then you had this as well, the Cypher comp, the Gen G comp. Of course, Gen G won a lot of these games with this comp and had a lot of success with it. In terms of the archetypes, this kind of double initiator idea, you know, was the dominant idea. You can see the what I call actual sentinels here, you know, did make up a decent chunk of something else. And then you had kind of double duelist stuff or solo Yoru stuff making up kind of smaller amounts of the meta. And then you've got 6.6% of people doing random stuff. And if we take a look at the agents on Bind, there are some interesting things to point out as well. The first one is the Brim. Every year that I've done this, Brim continues to win on Bind. He's always been the best controller on this map, it seems, in terms of the win rates, and that was very much true this year as well. With, you know, some other people trying the Omen, didn't really work for Omen on Bind this season. Cypher was good this year on Bind, a very good choice, as you can see, as we saw in the comp, obviously, prior as well. The initiators, which I found quite interesting as well. So the pick rates here, you've obviously got Gecko and Sky kind of, you know, as the main two choices, but Fade, KO were also options that people did go for. But actually, other than Sky, everyone just kind of hovering around slightly below 50%, but Sky actually was the highest of all of them, still surviving here on 55%. Yoru, the solo Yoru ideas didn't really work. Okay, onto Breeze, and I know most of you probably don't care too much about Breeze, but surprisingly, Breeze had a more interesting meta than you might have thought this season. In terms of the pick rates of the comp, the old kind of meta comp, you know, was the most picked, but actually was below 50%. And some better ideas were kind of, you know, the more aggressive, like, you know, we've got here the Jet Yoru double duelist, or, you know, like the Gen G comp down here with the Jet Yoru and no Sentinel whatsoever and playing the Astra as well. You know, these more aggressive ideas did tend to do better on Breeze. But you could see we actually did have quite a few, you know, a split archetype here, right? Between the double duelist, between the double controllers, and between the double initiators. It actually, you know, we had kind of a nice little rock, paper, scissors kind of thing going on, which is nice. In terms of the agent win rates and pick rates, you can see that obviously Cypher, Sova, Viper. It's no surprise we only have 8 agents here overall on the sheet, and you can see that 2 of them are kind of grayed out here in Sova and Viper, because of course everyone's picking Sova and Viper on Breeze. Astra did very, very well, right? Astra did very well. Harbor, not so much. As you can see, it seems like if you're going to pick a second controller on Breeze, pick Astra. And then finally we have Haven. Now, of course, again, Haven, a map that, you know, hasn't been in the pool that long overall, but there are some interesting things about Haven that you might not expect necessarily. So Haven was out of 102 comps here, and well, the first top comp I've got here is kind of the old meta comp, but with a Cypher instead. Now, it must be said, whether it was the Cypher version of this comp or the Killjoy version of this comp, both of them did awfully, right? So if you're playing Omen, Jet, Killjoy or Cypher, Sova, Breach, you probably didn't win. Basically, because the Killjoy version of this comp had an even lower win rate than this 42 number here, and actually had a similar sort of pick rate as well. The more successful ways of doing it was to play the Neon. Neon did very, very well on this map overall, and obviously I've got the Fnatic comp for you here at the bottom with the Yoru ISO that Fnatic kind of dominated on this map with. In terms of the different archetypes here, they were mostly in this kind of sphere of, you know, old meta, Jet, Sova, Breach. I'm also including kind of just Neon in this as well, right? That they play in a very similar sort of style overall. And that was most of the meta, but there were, you know, some ISO comps in there, as you can see. Actually, a fairly decent amount of ISO comps and some double controller stuff as well. And in terms of the agent win rates, though, yes, this is a smaller sample size. And for this, I only required 10 games to get onto the sheet here for Haven. But there is some outlandish numbers early on here in the Haven meta. I mean, you just take a look at it here. Breach doing awful. Again, spoiler alert for the second video in this, but Breach always does awful in this exercise. We'll get into that in tomorrow's video. But here on Haven, last year he was around this number as well, 33%. But you can see the difference between Cypher and Killjoy is astronomical, right? 20 out of 26. So there's one game where Killjoy played and the other team didn't play a Sentinel whatsoever, and the Killjoy won and got 7. But in the head-to-head, it was straight 20 out of 26 games the Cypher won. That's a pretty crazy amount, right? And Cypher actually had a higher pick rate than Killjoy as well. So on Haven, it definitely seems like Cypher is the way to go right now. Maybe because Cypher also counters Neon a bit better, who did pretty well as well here, as you can see, with a 63% win rate, because Jet did not do so well, right? So basically, don't play Killjoy, it seems, and don't play Jet, right? You're better off playing Neon. Obviously, Fnatic also contributed to this with the kind of Yoru ISO stuff, with ISO obviously having a pretty high win rate, thanks in part mostly to Fnatic and how dominant they were on this map. But the Cypher Killjoys thing is like a big deal, I think, and I think you should read into that at least right now, it seems like Cypher is the better option on Haven. Okay, so that is part 1 of the meta stats, and tomorrow's video, we're going to take a look at some maps where there's some juicy things going on, and of course the overall data as well. So tune in for tomorrow's video, where we will break down the rest of the pool.